Welcome to Millennial Pagan Podcast, the podcast that's discussing issues and hot topics influencing the pagan world from a millennial perspective. We're your hosts, Autumn Wolf
and Jera Stone, and back in studio with us for a third episode. We're discussing the same thing. We got Tim.
Yay! Witches and trials.
Hello, I am Tim.
Maybe a little less Pope-idics.
Yeah. Okay, so from here on out, the popery starts to take a back seat.
Good, it was starting to smell in here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I love me a good popery. They're really tasty, but it just... Oh.
There's just so many Johns.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, my goodness. And Johns and Innocents and Benefices and Gregories. And but then again, there were a lot of Henrys in the kings.
That's true.
Yeah, which, both England and France had Henry for kings. Different kings, but anyway. So if I remember correctly, we left off with the Spanish Inquisition.
That was unexpected.
Yes, it was.
But it wasn't.
That's true. It was not unexpected because historically speaking, the inquisitors had to give each of the different churches and dioceses in areas that they were going to at least a 30-day notice before they got out there. So
okay, we're planning on leaving. It's going to be a 30-day trip to get to London from here. Let's send them a telegram ahead of time.
They didn't have telegrams.
Let's send them a pigeon ahead of time.
They didn't have pigeons. Pigeons weren't around back then.
Pigeons evolved in the last 500 years?
Yes, they did.
Oh.
Actually, I mean, really, fun fact.
Fun
fact. Pigeon is French for dove. So whenever we're talking about pigeons, we're just calling them doves because they, physiologically, they are in the dove family.
That makes sense. They're just gray.
The more you know.
Going past popies. So now I do have to mention one final thing about Pope guys, because in 1486.
You just made me a liar to all of my listeners.
Hold on.
1486.
This is important.
All right.
This is where it really starts to get wicked.
I'm holding my tits for 1486.
God, thank you. Pope Innocent the Eighth.
I see so many.
I know. But he authorized 2 German monks to investigate accusations of witchcraft as heresy, threatening those who interfered with their work. A papal bull authorizing the correcting, imprisoning, punishing, and chastising of devil worshippers who have, quote, slain infants, among other crimes. He did so at the request of an inquisitor by the name of Heinrich Kramer.
Oh, no.
Who had been...
Heimer.
Yep. Who had been refused permission by local bishops in Germany to investigate. However, historians like Ludwig von Pastor insist that the bull neither allowed anything new nor was necessarily binding on the Catholic concessions, but anybody who knows anything about history with witches know the name Heinrich Kramer, who was the original author of the Malleus Maleficarum. The Hammer of Witches.
Get your hammer away from me.
Right. And so he started writing this, and he didn't finish it. Jerry Springer finished writing it for him. Springer? Yeah. Jerry Springer. No.
Wrong Springer.
We
wrong.
Don't cheer this one.
So that, if you could say there was one book or one thing that was actually written to condemn witches, it was the Malleus Maleficarum. In this, it basically was a checklist of, if this person did this, they're a witch. If the person did this, they're a witch. And not only was it a checklist of figuring out if they're a witch or not, but also what punishments they should have been given.
It just sounds like it wouldn't be that big of a book, but every time you see it in Hollywood, they make it like this huge ass tomb. And it's like, what the shit? How'd you carry that around?
It wasn't a huge book because, Hollywood likes to overemphasize things like the size of my penis. And,
I'm not, nope.
You don't want to touch that?
I got nothing.
Yeah, I'm dirty, by the way, just to let you guys know who's listening. So from there, we're gonna try not to talk too much about the popes anymore. The only reason why is because 2 main things happen. Number one, the rise of witch trials start in roughly the 1500s. So 1500s is where, after 1486, and after the Spanish Inquisition was commissioned by Ferdinand and Isabella, the 1500s was really and truly the beginning of the burning years, which is what we have been leading up to this entire time. Another main thing that was happening was on October 31st in 1517, a monk by the name of Martin Luther got nailed on the church steps in Wittenberg, and he didn't get nailed. He nailed
a thing.
Yes, he nailed his 95 thesis to, and see, there's like two different thoughts here. It was either the door or it was like a common board, where people put up all different kinds of things. Now, he did this on October 31st because it was the beginning of All Hallowtide Mass. And
everybody would be going through the door.
Exactly. Everybody would go through the door and they would see, oh, what's this paper nailed up here? And
this is new news. What kind of new news is on the
bed? Well, we are going to be coming out of the church and we see this beautiful piece of paper. And in this piece of paper, they find out that the Pope is very, very bad man.
It's not a lost dog sign. I thought it would be a lost dog sign.
Yeah, no. It was a lost God sign. Your dyslexia is kicking in again.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. No, it's cool.
They don't really have very good tutors these days.
Well, no, the tutors kind of died out in the 1500s, but I'll get to that later.
Yeah.
English joke. Okay. So Protestantism comes into the play. And like the fans of fire burning, just burning. Yes. So like the flames of fire that were fanned out to start Protestant Reformation and to change from the Catholic Church to being the direct contact with God, so did witchcraft trials. Because the Protestants, from this point forward, were the ones who really, really, really wanted to nail those witches hard, and not in the fun, kinky way.
I have no clue what just happened.
Neither do I.
The Protestants became a thing, and they really did not like witches more than the Catholics. The Catholics were like, we could put up with this shit. I mean, we want to make sure it's well-defined, well-understood. Everybody knows what the hell a witch is and how to deal with them, and that's about it.
So they pretty much went all extremist on it.
Yeah, the Protestants were like, well, we're not the Catholics, and you know what? We're going to clean up the streets of these witches.
Yes.
It's pretty much everything that we just covered the last episode.
Okay.
Yeah. You good now?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm caught up.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good.
All right.
You were here the whole time, though.
Kind of.
Was he, though?
I'm pretty sure he made
All
comments.
Right. So, 1532, Emperor Charles V declared that harmful witchcraft, not unharmful witchcraft, but harmful witchcraft should be punished by death by fire. So this is where the burning of the witches came in, 1532.
And the whole town smells like hair.
Yeah, right? A bad perm. And burning fat. 1542, we're going to hop over from the mainland to go to England. English law made witchcraft a secular crime.
And didn't change that.
No, they didn't. So it has now gone from a matter of a problem with the church to a matter of a problem with the rest of the world. So now if you say this person is a witch and they say, oh, I'm in the church, I can't be tried for that. That's no longer the case. Now anybody can be tried as a witch in 1542.
Because now it's a legal government thing. The government stuck their nose in church.
Now, I know I mentioned last podcast that I was going to talk about numbers. This is a great time to pull in some raw data and facts that has been compiled. Now, I know it is popular to say millions of witches died during the burning years. Guess what? It wasn't millions. No. At the most estimate, 80,000 people were tried and executed. Now, there were more that were tried and exonerated, but actual execution, the top number is about 80,000.
In Europe.
In Europe alone, yes.
Well, and how many of those would have actually been witches, too? Because if they can just say, hey, that person's a witch, they looked at me weird.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the way that we look at and call ourselves in this room witches. Right. Definitely not. No, they were all Christian or innocent people that just,
Christian, innocent people, Jews, Muslims,
gay,
anybody that they didn't like, oh, you're wearing an orange shirt today, you're a witch. You must be burned. Sorry, T. It's your fault. You wore the orange. Yeah. I don't make up the rules. It's in the Malleus Maleficarum.
Orange is an indication of witchcraft. You're just so bright.
Thank you.
So, the best modern estimates suggest that about 3/4 of those executed for witchcraft in Europe were women. Only 3/4. Because that was also a very, very popular misconception, is that it was all women who were killed. No.
That's not even the case for Salem.
Yeah, exactly. So men and women appear to have been equally vulnerable to the accusations in part of France, while men outnumbered women as suspects in some countries on the periphery, such as Iceland and Estonia. I'm going to put a pin on Iceland because it's an awesome story I just read about last night. Now, these figures were outweighed, however, by those from Germany and Scotland, where some 70% of the accused were women, and regions like Hungary, Denmark, and England, where 90% of the witches were female. The potential influence of sexual stereotypes on prosecutions was illustrated as a list of, quote, presumptions against witches drawn up for the JPs, the Justices of the Peace, in Yorkshire in 1592. Now, the presumption was, and this is a direct quote, that they were mostly commonly weak women. And why is it that women were accused a lot? Because women had power, even in the Middle Ages. If you look at Jewish history, when it comes to the day-to-day living inside the home, the woman rules the house.
Yep.
And that still continued on all throughout history. Now, there were also women that were women of their own means, whether it was through agriculture or through sexual prostitution. But there were a lot of women who definitely had their own power. And the easiest way to take those women out were to say, you're a witch. She could be burned. It's in the law. We're good now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was super fucked up. Now, also, this quote that I was reading, rambling through, is actually from one of the mini textbooks that I got while I was at ASU. And it goes on to say that Rebecca Larner, who did a lot of study and research into witches, she says that accusations were aimed primarily against witches rather than women through the social position of women. Though the social position of women made them unusually vulnerable to prosecutions. According to her famous formulation, witchcraft was sex-related, but not sex-specific, since it was never denied that men as well as women could be guilty of the crime. She argues that attempts to explain witch hunters in terms of the suppression of women by men distract historians from the wider political and religious context of the persecutions. It's necessary first to explain why Europeans came to accept the reality of satanic witchcraft, and then to consider why women were specifically vulnerable to accusations. So, I know that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So when it gets right down to it, anybody could have been accused. It's just there was a higher percentage that was women. Now, I wanted to look up to see what happened in Iceland and Estonia.
Because why not?
Yeah.
In Iceland, it was Jan. I know his name was Jan. There were two Jans. There was Jan Magnusson and Jan Jansson.
Again with the Jans.
Yeah, because the Jans is very nice. Shit, where did I put that? Okay, I'll go back to Jan in a second. 1592. The Baltic German nobleman and landowner Johann von Mex accused his wife Anna Zoigi of having caused the death of his father and the illness of himself by use of poison, and then was accused in witchcraft. This was the beginning of the Estonian trials. She then turned around and said, no, I wasn't the witch. He was the witch. And him and several other of his friends were executed as witches.
Well, girl, go.
Yeah. So, girl power. Now, in Iceland, Jan Magnusson accused John Johnson. I'm just going to say John because, whatever. John Johnson and his son John Johnson of witchcraft because...
They were just so concerned with their Johnson.
They were. Mm-hmm. Well, the younger of the Johns, Johnson, cast a runic farting spell.
Wait, whoa.
It's right up Jera's alley.
I
need to know more about this.
I'm trying to find it. I swear to God, I wrote all this shit down, and it's brilliant. Oh, it's at the bottom. It's at the bottom of all my notes.
Of course it's at the bottom.
Yes, of course it's at the bottom.
I just love the fact that the term runic farting spell just came out of your mouth.
When I first read it, I was like, no, this cannot be a thing. But no, it was a thing. So what they would do is they would write very specific runes to cast a spell on a very specific person. This person, in case, happened to have been a milkmaid that spurned Yan the Younger. And so he was like, fuck it, I'm going to cast a spell on you, which gives you gastrointestinal distress, a.k.a. diarrhea, and your stomach fills up with so much gas that all you do is fart for an entire year.
You can't be a milkmaid at that point.
Nope. No. I mean, you would fit right in with the cows because they fart all the time.
You can milk the cows, but you can't deliver the milk.
Yeah, because farting, it's a thing.
People don't want you near their front door.
Yeah, no.
Oh, milk's here. How do you know?
Oh, here is your milk today. Jan, what did you do to my butt? So
Thank you, Greta. You can move on now, Greta.
So there was a book that somebody did all the research about this particular case, as well as many others, entitled Grimoires, A History of Magic, written by Owen Davies. And in this... he said that in 1656, which is when the farting incident happened, the instructions to the reader was to write a series of runic symbols in blood on white calf skin, which, quote, are to affect your belly with a great shitting and shooting pains. And all these may affect your belly with very great farting.
Very great.
May your bones split asunder, may your guts burst, may your farting never stop, neither day nor night. May you become so weak as the fiend Loki, who was snared by all the gods. This was written in the Janssen's Grimoire.
Oh, man.
Hashtag research win.
I need to learn this spell. I got a couple people I need to...
okay, yeah.
I need to cast this on.
I'm ordering the book.
Okay.
So when it comes, I know I have to share it with my aunt. Hello, Alma, I love you. And I'm definitely going to share it with other people as well, because holy shit, literally.
Literally.
So, 1560 to 1630, majority of the European trials. The first major persecution in Europe was 1563, in which witches were caught, tried, convicted, and burned in the imperial lordship of Weissensteig in southern Germany. Weissensteig, yeah. Now, this was recorded in 1563 in a pamphlet that translates the title to True and Horrifying Deeds of 63 Witches. I'm still trying to track down an English copy of that to read just because I want to read it. Now, we're going to fast forward a little bit here. Because the burning times were horrible, terrible things, and there's a lot of different trials that happened, and in the book, I'm actually going to give when the first incident happened in each country and raw numbers from each country as to how many people were tried and executed as witches, whether it was burnt or pressed or, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. But we're going to skip from here to merry old England to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
But first, we're going to take a short break.
Oh.
But first.
We're
going
to... Millennial Pagan Podcast is exclusively supported by Patreon. Listeners like you can gain great benefits from your favorite show, such as...
At $1 a month, you get a personalized shout-out at the end of the next full-length episode.
At $5 a month, you receive a thank you card in the mail with a Millennial Pagan Podcast button and sticker enclosed. Additionally, $5 a month supporters have access to our monthly 30-minute minisodes.
Patreon supporters are also the first to learn about new and exciting updates to Millennial Pagan Podcast.
More benefits and exclusive content to come.
All right, and we are back, going back into the whole burning times. I know we're starting to get into the meat and potatoes of this.
Yes.
So we just visited Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
Farting spell. Runic farting spell. Yeah.
Estonia.
Oh,
actually, I completely forgot to say something about Estonia.
Okay.
In Estonia, not only Estonia, Litvonia, all those Onias up in that area, not only did they have witch trials, but they also had werewolf trials as well at the exact same time.
And we thought that was an Irish thing.
Yeah, no, there were in the 1500s there were many werewolf trials that happened in the upper Baltic states. And they basically equated them to the same thing as witchcraft. So no matter what, it was heresy. For you to become Harry, it was heresy. I know that was a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
Now Werewolf's just a really good game to play at con.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
You know, Werewolf in the Dark?
The card game.
Yeah.
Also known as Mafia.
Yeah.
I have that game. We'll
Secret
play it.
Hitler.
Yeah.
We'll play it. Secret Hitler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the same
totally
game.
a thing.
I prefer Werewolf.
Secret Hitler was like from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I'm
anyway.
showing my age.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway. Now that was going on in Estonia. In Russia during all of this time, 1552, Ivan IV, also known as Ivan Grozny, better known as Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Vasilyevich, whatever you want to call him, he actually issued a decree declaring witch trials were to be civil matters rather than church matters in Russia. And there is like another whole huge rabbit hole about the Russian witch trials, because most people focus on Central Europe, specifically Spain, France, Germany, Italy, and England. But they also, they cut out the whole Russian aspect. So that will be in the book, because
Nice.
I love Russian history, and Ivan Grozny was one of my absolute favorite Russian monarchs of all time. But anyway, now, 1559. Yeah, I know, we're kind of crawling here, but at the same time, this is the next huge point. Denmark became the first country in Scandinavia to have official witch trials. And this is important because the royal ordinance was issued by Christian IV, who condemned witchcraft and declared all of those found guilty to be burned. It was estimated about 2,000 witches were tried in Denmark, with around half of them being executed. So about 1,000 people were burned at the stake. Now, the reason why Christian IV is important is in 1589, King James VI of Scotland, also to become King James I of England, a unified Scotland and England, married Princess Anne of Denmark, who was 14 at the time, but, it's a context thing.
And they had a really bad travel experience.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly where I'm getting to. Now, Princess Anne of Denmark is the sister of Christian IV. So, all of the King James witch trials that happened in Scotland and England were because he became obsessed with witchcraft after marrying her. So what the story is she got on a boat to leave from Oslo to go to Scotland so that they could consummate their marriage. Bad storm happens. So she goes back home. Tries it again a few months later. Bad storm happens. She gets on a boat, goes back home. James, in the only romantic gesture that he gave his entire life, got in his own boat with 300 other people, like a fleet of 300, I think. I don't remember. But he hiked it over there, got married to her over there. Then they traveled and toured all around in Denmark and left from there to come back home. Another storm. Now, what was happening during that time period, they say that there was a group of witches. I know that definitely Gilly Duncan was one of the names, and there was another one, Agnes something or other. But they were being tried. About 100 witches were being tried, as well as Frances Stuart Hepburn, a.k.a. the 5th Earl of Bothwell, who was the last Earl of Bothwell. They were all tried for witchcraft and heresy because around the time that the princess was trying to come across the ocean, they were caught on the cliffs of Scotland doing dances and satanic rituals and whatnot. So, it was after all of this that happened that King James himself was like, you know what? I think we mistranslated the Bible, and we need to write a new translation of the Bible.
It's not poisoners.
No. So, Ezekiel 25, we all know this verse, thou shalt not let a witch suffer to live, or however he words it. In other words, kill all witches. The actual original translation, as best as possible, from the Hebrew is, you should not let bad people live. This also, in context, goes along with, here's talking about people who rob, people who cheat, people who swindle, all of these bad people. Not anything satanic or witchcraft at all was in the original book, the original Hebrew of Ezekiel. It was King James who changed it to not letting a witch to live, because he became so obsessed with witchcraft while he was in Denmark and watching all of the Danish witch trials. He also included other verses and changed the translations to say witchcraft bad, witchcraft bad, witchcraft bad.
We're just going to put this here.
Yeah, we're just going to...
Sprinkle a little bit of witchcraft
there we
bad.
go. Now, he also wrote a book called Demonology, which was his interpretation of witches. Later on in life, he decided, well, maybe witches really aren't a thing and they're not that bad. So he took everything back.
But you can't.
But you can't. You can't take back what's written. Now, a side note on Earl of Bothwell and the New Brunswick witch
Would it
trials.
Be Brunswick?
Yes.
Because New Brunswick's in New Jersey. I know.
Yeah.
I was born there.
Yeah. Side note on the witch trial that happened at that point in time. Bothwell and Gilly Duncan were quoted in two different instances, one in 1591 and one in 1593, of saying a magical incantation that was, "Come or go ye before, come or go ye, if ye will not go before, come or let me," which was then in the 1800s put to a tune, and my band, Far From Home, sings "The Witch is Real." Yes. So, "The Witch is Real," and I didn't know this until the day before I was giving my oral presentation for my capstone paper. "The Witch is Real" ties directly into the Salem witch trials, because it goes from King James with the "Witch is Real" song to Puritans, who then took the King James translation of the Bible and used it solely as their definitive Bible translation. And then the Puritans, of course, after they decided that they didn't want to stay in England anymore, they came over to the New Colonies, which was named after Amerigo Vespucci, which we all know as Northern America. The Puritans came over to America, and then Salem happens several years later in 1591. To 1592. Now, that was not the first nor the last witch trials in America. There was actually a guy in Tennessee in the late 1800s that was tried as a witch. Yeah. More research on him later. So, there is, in a nutshell, and I have to say in a nutshell because there are so many subtle nuances that I skipped over and glossed over due to time constraints, of how we went from people going out and being part of the Dionysus ancient mystery cult to being burnt at the stake in England, in the American colonies. Yeah, wow. It's so convoluted, and it's absolutely fascinating. All the little tidbits that I have uncovered over the years. Also, another side note. Speaking of Salem, my wife found out that she was adopted at an early age, and she has been constantly trying to find her birth parents. Through the magic and science of Ancestry and 23andMe, we have actually found blood relatives of hers. It is her grandfather's sister, whom we call Aunt Annie, and she's an amazing human. Aunt Annie and another cousin who was adopted. She's a first cousin, but she was adopted to a different family as well. They both found Aunt Annie, and the cousin did some research, and they can trace their family lineage, which the last name is Cole, all the way back to Rebecca Nurse, one of the first witches tried and convicted and executed at Salem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So not only is this research important to me, but it's also important to her because, it gives her a closer connection to the inner witch that she always has been.
And it could definitely be something. It's a calling by proxy.
Yeah.
Putting this information out there and getting the real story out there.
Yeah. Wow, I'm spent. I know you guys are listening to this on 2 different days, but we recorded this all in one afternoon.
Yes.
Because we're crazy like that.
Yeah.
I'd love to get you and Kevin Smith in a room together just to talk.
I would just fucking love to talk with Kevin Smith. Yeah. That man is amazing. I would even be okay with Jason Mewes sitting over there jerking off in the corner while we're talking, because that's what he does.
Yeah.
Although I do have to say, I'm really impressed with the fact that Jason Mewes has completely turned his life around and gotten away from the terrible substances that he was on for a good chunk of his life and has made a complete recovery. So.
Oh, yeah.
And today we want to thank our newest Patreon supporter, Chelsea. Chelsea, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
If you are not a Patreon supporter, obviously you learned about how to become a Patreon supporter in our break. So thank you. Please think about going and being a Patreon supporter.
Yes.
So, Jera, how do people find you?
Of course, you can find me on Twitter at Jera Stone, on the Instagrams as Haggard_cosplay. And, of course, you can always just, see my lovely face on the interwebs.
It is lovely.
Yes.
And, Tim, if somebody wants to start a witch war with you, where can they find you?
We can totally have a witch off at the Saguaro branch of the Phoenix Library. No, I'm kidding. I am easily found online through Far From Home. That's my band. Also, we have a subdivision for education called Far From Home Presents. We do a lot of conventions, and we don't do a huge amount of posting on there, sadly, because other life takes over. But just look up Far From Home Presents, and you can also find me on my personal Facebook page, which is Tim Shafer, spelled Shafer. I don't care if people like me, friend me, follow me, whatever. My life is an open book.
Stalk you.
Stalk me, please.
I already do.
I know, and I love it. And I love you.
Stop touching each other.
No. Oh, damn it.
Later.
Yes.
Thank God we're not on YouTube.
Not yet.
Well, video on YouTube.
Right, that.
And you can find me, Autumn Wolf, at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Millennial Pagan Pod, and you can read my blog at Iron Wolf Circle on WordPress.
So you don't have YouTube personally?
No.
So you can't say that you have a UTwit faceagram?
No.
Okay.
The pod does have a UTwit faceagram.
UTwit faceagram.
You can find the pod, of course, on Facebook as Millennial Pagan Podcast.
Millennial Pagan Frogcast is the wrong one.
No, those are the frogs that I turned
yes.
disgruntled guests.
I'm gruntled. I'm super gruntled. I am above gruntled.
You are the most pleasantly grumpled. I don't even know.
Pleasant
It's
happy.
like it's like whelmed.
Yeah.
You can be whelmed.
Oh, you can totally be whelmed.
Yeah. Alrighty. You can also find Millennial Pagan Pod at Pagan Pod on Twitter and Insta, and you can email us at millennialpaganpod@gmail.com.
And big thank you to Tim for doing this research, and we look forward to getting that book out there because that's going to be definitely awesome. So
yeah, and I really and truly thank you guys so much for having me on here. It's a lot of fun. Now it makes me want to do my own podcast. Ooh, I think I'll call it KTIM, All Tim, All the Time.
TMI.
No, TMI is not how you spell my name.
And if you would like to have Tim back to talk about the North American witch trials,
they're so exciting.
Comment wherever you can comment to this particular episode.
Hey.
Send us a message on any of those social medias. And,
Teaser.
Yeah.
It was more than just the continental North America. It was also up in Canada and down in the Caribbean islands that were there were some witch trials down there too.
That's what I said.
Wicked.
North
Wicked.
America, not United States.
Wicked awesome.
North America.
Yeah, and all of this was pre-United States.
Exactly.
Everything was done before 1776.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was going to say the witch trials really kind of stopped because of scientific deductive reasoning, and it was jury trials. You had to have physical evidence in a jury trial before you can convict somebody.
AKA no more spectral bullshit.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I didn't even touch on the spectral evidence and the familiars and Cotton Mather, and I don't want to touch on Increase Mather because he was old and crusty.
He increased the crust level of a room. All right. Well, guys, if you want to hear more about us talking about witch trials of all sorts of styles and different types of evidence and such, then let us know. Mm-hmm. But from all of us here, merry meet.
Merry part.
And merry meet again. Who said mead?
That was me.
Oh,
I'm thirsty.
Ah.